Hello everybody and welcome to Freddie Fridays. Now, a week or so ago, I said that I wasn't sure if this was a legit copy of Mr. Bad Guy, all because of that. Well, I found another thing that made me think suspiciously that this wasn't a actual real copy and it was a bootleg. The Mr. Bad Guy font, as well, is slightly different from the original release, the original American release, I should say. But here's another thing I didn't tell you. I had the CD in this CD holder. I put it in this CD holder. I didn't show you the actual CD holder that I originally got it from, because I wanted to think that this was a legitimate copy. It didn't come in this CD holder originally when I got the CD. Nope. It came in this type of CD holder. And as you can see with the CD, I don't know if that's supposed to be a legitimate CD, but there is some gray, look like it was or made differently, I should say. And that doesn't usually look like a legitimate CD copy. So I figured, because what I really wanted, I bought this at Discogs originally, and I wanted the original CD release, because if you looked at the CD, it doesn't have the Columbia with that record swirl on it. I wanted the one with the Columbia CD swirl on it. So those are some of the indicators why I thought this was a bootleg, because I decided to get another copy, and surprisingly enough, as you can see with the Compact Disc logo and the Digi Mastered text, it looks like the original text. And the Mr. Bad Guy font looks correct to be the original release in the US. And I have taken this out just to play it. And by the way, this is the actual CD holder, because if you take it out, which I will, as you see, this is the original release. And as you can tell, there is no gray that is surrounding this plastic part, which means it looks legitimate. And you can tell the original Columbia Records logo on the side. And of course, later copies, of course, will have just the Columbia logo and not the record swirl logo on there, like I did show. And of course, it won't say CBS Records on the bottom there. It'll say Sony Music Entertainment. I know there's legitimate copies of Mr. Bad Guy with the Columbia logo. Unfortunately, this isn't it, but as you can see, it just has Columbia on it. And the Sony Music Entertainment part. Like I mentioned, there are legitimate copies out there with that. And I just wanted to point out that you want to make sure you're not buying a bootleg. However, I will say this. Just because I bought a bootleg without knowing that it was a bootleg, it's the sound quality, I should say, isn't too bad at all. Honestly, the sound quality is just fine. I didn't have a problem with the sound quality, but I'm going to compare the sound quality with the original copy, so that way you'll know what's the difference, because there are some differences between the two. You're going to find that out right now. Now, before I actually compare the sound quality, I want to show you the backs of both CDs. This, of course, is the original release, and you can tell by the paper that it looks higher quality. And I put the correct CDs on each side, so that way you can tell which one's the legitimate, as you can see. And this one is, I believe, the bootleg. And if you can feel, the paper feels a little flimsy, and it looks like it was possibly done on a regular sheet of paper, because it looks thinner than this. This looks a little thicker, as you can see. You know, they got the printing right. The paper looks thinner with this one. This, of course, is the one that I always thought that was a bootleg. And as for the front covers, if you can feel that, it feels higher quality. The paper feels much thicker. And it looks like the pictures look like they are much clearer, and Freddie Mercury looks much clearer. And the Mr. Bad Guy font is actually the original American release, along with the compact disc logo and the digitally mastered analog recording font. And of course, if you look at the Freddie Mercury Mr. Bad Guy copy that I bought last year, as you can see, the digitally mastered analog recording font is different from the original release, even though they did get the compact disc logo right. Even though there are several other things about this is not correct, and that is with the font with Mr. Bad Guy. Even though I do like the font, that's not the original American release. And you can easily tell that the picture of Freddie Mercury looks darker, and the paper that is used is thinner, just like I mentioned with the back cover even. Now, the good thing about both of them is that they are both correct, but Freddie Mercury's picture looks a lot clearer on the original release compared to this release. Looks a lot darker. And this is also correct along with this, since it is the original release. Now, each one has the lyrics when you fold out the fold-out sheet, and as you can see, they're both the same, essentially. They're both centered correctly. And this, I really feel, is the only thing that looks right on both sides. So no real comparison here. None are at that bad. I thought maybe comparing both of them there would be some slight differences, but no. They both look the same. Maybe the text is a little bit bolder than the American one, but those are the only real comparisons I can make with the lyrics. And of course, Freddie Mercury looks a lot clearer in the original release than the CD that I bought last year. It looks a little darker. And of course, like I mentioned, the paper is thinner on this one, and the paper on this is more thicker, more high quality. Now for the audio comparison. For this first audio comparison, I am showing quite a bit of screenshots through Audacity. The top represents the original release of Mr. Bad Guy back in 1985, while the bottom represents the non-legitimate release that I bought last year. As you can see on the top, there's hardly no compression with the songs, and that is due to the fact that back in the day there was hardly any compression used for CD releases. But as time went along, mixers decided to use compression to make the songs louder. And as a result, the non-legitimate release that I bought last year has compression. That is because they are using audio files that were done after 1985. So there's going to be compression no matter what. However, the screenshots I want to show you are with the songs Living on My Own and Love Me Like There's No Tomorrow. And you can easily see the difference. The non-legitimate copy that I bought last year has a second of silence before the song is heard, where the legitimate release has no second silence, and you hear the song immediately after it's played. The audio comparison that I'm going to have you hear is going to be 5-second audio clips of the differences between the original release and the non-legitimate copy that I bought last year. First, with Living on My Own. Here is the original release. And here's the song from the non-legitimate copy that I bought last year. Now for Love Me Like There's No Tomorrow. Here is the original release.
You had to kill the conversation.
And here's the 5-second clip from the non-legitimate copy that I bought last year.
You had to kill the conversation.
So now you know clearly what is the better release. Which one is better than the other? No question, the original release beats the non-legitimate release, bar none. And I definitely know that the non-legitimate release wasn't mastered properly. And I bet you it was made in Russia rather than in the United States. The United States never would have made that mistake of having a song have a second silence every single time. At least with those two tracks. The rest of the tracks are completely fine, because those tracks you hear immediately after you play the track. You don't hear a 1-second gap. It's only with Living on My Own and Love Me Like There's No Tomorrow. But that is no excuse. That's definitely no excuse. You now know what's not a legitimate copy. Now that the audio comparison is done, it's time to wrap it up. So there you go. Now you know that this is not as legitimate as this. So if you're trying to find a legitimate copy, I suggest that you stay away from these type of releases. However, if you don't care about the legitimacy of the Mr. Bad Guy releases, then this is fine. This is not a bad release at all. The problem is it's not legitimate enough to sound or even compare with the original or even one of the re-releases. But I will point out that you could still buy one of these and it might be fine with you. The sound quality isn't too bad at all. It just has some problems that prevent it from being a legitimate copy. So that's my comparison, and I'd like to thank you all very much for watching, and to watch out for bootlegs. Now before I end the video here, I'm going to rephrase what I said, because I said beware of bootlegs. Really, I should have said beware of counterfeits, because once I did more research online, I found out what a counterfeit CD is. A counterfeit CD is a carbon copy of the original CD release, but with some differences. So this qualifies as a counterfeit. So beware of counterfeits. And even though this is not a legitimate release, it isn't bad audio-wise. It has good sound quality, even though it's slightly compressed, like I showed. But I will say this would be okay if some people don't even care about legitimacy. But if you are a highly sorted collector and want Queen albums or Freddie Mercury albums, then you want to have a legitimate copy, not a counterfeit one. But if you're okay sound-wise with a Mr. Bad Guy CD that is not legitimate, then it don't really matter. But be aware of counterfeits and make sure that this is a legitimate CD release if you are a Queen or a Freddie Mercury fan. I bought this last year through Discogs, and I thought I was getting the original CD release. Unfortunately, I didn't get that, and I could have actually sent this back if I really wanted to, but I kept it because I didn't have Mr. Bad Guy, and I still wanted to get the original CD release, and thankfully a week or so ago I finally got a legitimate copy. So like I mentioned, this is just a video talking about the difference between the actual CD release in America. I'm not talking about the UK release, because the font for the UK release is a lot different, and that's with the Mr. Bad Guy font. But just like I mentioned, I'm just pointing out the differences between a official copy and a counterfeit copy. And that's all I really wanted to talk about in this episode of Freddie Fridays. And I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And watch out for counterfeits if you are a Queen or Freddie Mercury fan. This is just some research to let you all know the differences. Thank you all for watching this episode. Later.